Welcome to Charts Today, European opening, and today's edition for Tuesday, the 30th of October, comes to you from London. And we start by looking at the dollar. Interestingly, US stocks fell further last night, but markets in Asia are recovering this morning. Dollar strength just continuing. We're seeing here that August high coming under pressure, and so the dollar just showing its strength, and that's continuing. We haven't yet activated this upside target, another 17% higher on the dollar, and we need to break these downtrends on the point and figure charts. But we are wandering out into bullish territory long term, and dollar is still looking very strong. If we look at the euro is still bearish on all three time frames now, and the yen, we're seeing the dollar jumping this morning, so that's confirming dollar strength. Sterling sinking lower against the dollar, sitting at 127.95 this morning, so below that 128 level. And against the euro, sterling is also sinking lower on the short-term chart. Against the Swiss franc, sterling is still bearish, and against the Aussie dollar, also bearish. Bitcoin is up slightly this morning, but fell off quite sharply yesterday, and that has broken a week of really going sideways. So we see that lurch down. That's confirming the bearishness on Bitcoin. Looking at the US market, the S&P was down 2/3%, so still pretty bearish, and we've got this downside target of 7.8% and 9% still hanging over us. So further falls are priced are looking potentially there. We're seeing the same on the Nasdaq, was down 2%. Tech stocks have really led us into the rise in the market this year, actually now leading us to the falls, and we're seeing 11% downside potential there, 5% on the short-term chart. The Dow was down as well, down just under 1%, and we're seeing a 10% downside target there as well. And the Russell 2000 index actually performed relatively well, having had a much bigger fall of late. It was down just under 0.5%, but still bearish on all three time frames. The futures this morning, the S&P future is up 0.4%. The Nasdaq future is up about 0.4% as well. So we are seeing improvements there. The FTSE future is down very slightly. The DAX future up just under 1%. Taking a look at the cash markets, the FTSE is still looking bearish, hasn't managed to recover even though it rose slightly yesterday, and the 250, the mid caps in the UK, also looking bearish, and the DAX rose yesterday but still in a downward trend and really looking pretty bearish. And CAC Current also performed relatively well yesterday, but downside targets dominate there. We do have a new upside target off the thrust yesterday. It'd be interesting to see if that's activated, but it would be difficult to see how it would buck the US. Japan up 1.3% this morning. Hong Kong down 0.75%. China up around 1%, which has been seesawing here a bit today, but Chinese market's still looking pretty bearish. Looking at the Indian market, we're down slightly, and the Australian market is up 1.3%. So we are seeing some improvement there. Looking to commodities, we see Brent crude is looking stronger this morning, but it's still in bearish territory. Really, it's struggling to rise on the short-term chart, and WTI much the same picture, just struggling to really turn bullish. US nat gas sitting steady at $3.19. Gold is at 12.26, just turning a little bit bearish, hitting some medium-term resistance. They just can't quite get through the cloud. And silver much the same thing. US 10-year yield sitting at 3.1%, and German bonds actually looking heading lower today as well, but still maintaining a short-term uptrend, slight recovery in the bond market, although the medium and long-term charts are bearish. Taking a look at stocks in the Asia Pacific region, we see most of the indices up here. The Nikkei up 1.5% nearly. So we are seeing mostly up. We're seeing the Sensex down, Indian market slightly down, but most other markets up. Looking at the performance we saw in Nasdaq last night, we had some pretty big falls. Google down 4.5%, Amazon down a further 6%. That's really now starting to unwind Amazon's performance, and we see that relative to the Dow Jones. Amazon is selling away very heavily now. Apple holding on to its relative strength. It was only down just under 2%, so the big stock bucking the market there. Facebook down a further 2.25%. Results out today will be interesting to see how the market takes those, but at the moment Facebook is looking pretty grim on the share price. Taking a look at some of the other majors, we've got Netflix was down 5%, so that's quite a big fall, and Microsoft also was down just under 3%, so also looking vulnerable there. The one stock that actually is seeming to buck the trend at the moment, having had a pretty poor year, was Tesla, and we're seeing that 20% underperformance coming all the way back to straight in line with the market. So after a great week last week, the fact that we're going higher still shows that relative strength. In the Aussie market, best performer was Beach Energy, up 10%, and the worst performer, James Hardie, down 3%. And in the Indian market, we saw Gale India up 3.43%. And if we look at some of the others, Bharat Petroleum falling. Looking quickly at China, most stocks actually rising, but that is changing, and the same with Hong Kong and the Nikkei. A lot of stocks actually on the rise, so that's pretty bullish. Looking to Europe, we see if we look at the FTSE yesterday, a lot of stocks up. GVC, HSBC was up nearly 5% on strong results, but doesn't really change the fact that the chart is looking pretty bearish. And if we look at Rolls-Royce, BAT, we're still a handful of stocks falling quite sharply, but most stocks were rising. Superdry was the best performer yesterday in the 250, having obviously had big sell-offs lately with profits warnings. And on the downside, in the 250, we had BBA Aviation down 4.36%. In Europe, we had Ultran Technologies up 12%, but really still looking very bearish. And on the downside, we had SEB still falling further, so we are seeing some quite big falls there. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.